because quantum physics, and I just want to say this as clearly as I can, is empirically proven beyond the slightest shadow of a doubt that this universe is a dream. There's no doubt about that. I've just written a book about that. And quantum physics is being called the greatest discovery in all of human history, ever, in the realm of science. And that there's not a debate about. But what there's a question about is, what does it mean? And being an outsider, not being a physicist, that's, I think, where I come in. And, because I'm trying to point out that when you contemplate quantum physics in a certain way, it's actually showing us how we're actually creating our experience of ourselves and our experience of the world each and every moment. And so I guess one way of starting the contemplation on quantum physics is that quantum physics, has really shown that the idea of that there's an objective world out there separate from us, that's false. That's an illusion. That's total. That's this nonsensical idea that doesn't have any correlate in reality. And quantum physics has empirically proven again and again that the act of us observing this universe actually influences the very universe that we're observing. That you can't make a separation between the observer and the observed. And that's the doorway in, because what I just described, that the act of observing actually influences the world that we're observing, that's very much like a dream. Because in a dream, if you have a particular point of view, that point of view is going to be reflected via the dream, because the dream is nothing other than your own mind, just reflected back. And so that effect, the observer effect is what it's called, is really, to me, that's the doorway into what I'm trying to point out with quantum physics. And now I'm not gonna be in this linear mode, because talking about quantum physics, it's hard to really, at least for me, to come from that point of view. So I'm gonna kind of, circle around certain things and try to connect them. So I do Tibetan Buddhist practice. And the particular tradition that I practice, there's this phenomena called terma. And I don't know if people have heard of terma. It translates as these hidden, sort of like this treasure. And one way of understanding it is that the great guru Padmasambhava, he founded Tibetan Buddhism, he actually was the one who created this tradition of the hidden treasures. And what he would do, he would plant these treasures in the universe, in the earth, in the sky, in like water, in oceans, or in his disciples' minds. And then he would inspire them to discover these hidden treasures at exactly the right moment that they were needed. And one way of thinking about this, it was almost like these treasures are like this vitamin that would heal, sort of like a compensation, kind of like the unconscious, compensates when we get one-sided. So these hidden treasures are like a compensation for when a people get too one-sidedly, whether it's intellectual, materialistic, whatever, all of a sudden this treasure would be discovered by the person who had the destiny, the fate to discover the terma, the hidden treasure. And it would be either a blessed object or a teaching that would be exactly the medicine that would bring the people, the culture, the world back into connection with itself, back into balance. Now, how come I'm talking about terma is I don't have any authority to say, oh, that's a terma, that's a hidden treasure, or that's not. But I'm very familiar with the idea. I've actually, in my stuff that I write, I've written articles about it. But I'm absolutely convinced that quantum physics is a modern day terma, that it's a modern day hidden treasure that we as a species have dreamed up into the world and into our minds, that can help us, that actually is exactly the medicine that we need to actually reflect back to us our actual circumstance and who we actually are in all of this. And, so that I just wanted to say that right out front, in the sense that what quantum physics, what it's showing us, if I go back to the observer effect, the act of observing actually it has an influence on the universe that we're observing. That's pointing out that the act of observation is creative. That each and every moment, that the way we interpret our experience, place meaning on it, that we're actually having an effect, we're actually creating our experience of ourselves and our experience of the world. There's no one outside of us who's doing that. We ourselves are the agency. We're the agent who's doing that. And so the idea of being quantum physics is actually revealing to us that we have this incredible creative power that almost all of us are unconscious of. Now, to go back to the dream, I can make this clear or more clear by contemplating, what I call like dreamlike nature, the dreamlike nature of reality. So if you're in a dream, if you're in a night dream, right? So let's invoke our imagination. We're in a night dream, and say you're holding a particular point of view about what you're experiencing in the dream. Well, being that the dream is, it's just a reflection of your own mind. If you hold a point of view in the dream, the dream has no choice but to instantaneously just shapeshift and reflect back your point of view. Now, if you're not awake at that moment to the nature of your situation, i.e. that you're dreaming, you're then, in all probability, you're going to interpret whatever you're experiencing as being objective, as being out there outside of yourself. And then you're going to react to it, and you'll become conditioned by your reactions, because then your reactions will just get reflected back, and you'll be in a feedback loop, the source of which is your own mind. And, but if in that dream you have the recognition, oh, I'm dreaming, and you have lucidity, then all of a sudden you're not going to be entranced by the forms of the dream in the way that you were before you had that realization. And what I'm pointing at is that we actually, in a sense, have entranced ourselves by the creative power of our own mind to conjure up our experience in a way that's killing us. That's really not serving us on the individual level, and collectively, it's being played out in the greater body politic of the world. And so one of the key sort of insights of my work is that our inner process, what's happening inside of our psyche, is actually getting played out. It's actually embodied and like reflected via the outside world. And that's just like a dream, that what's playing out outside is actually in some sort of like this symbolic sort of way is actually expressing what's going on inside of us. But, in that dream, if you hold a viewpoint, and like I was saying, then the dream will instantaneously will just reflect our, it'll offer us all the evidence to confirm our viewpoint, because the dream is just this reflection of our mind. If we aren't awake in that moment, we now have proof. We have proof of the objectivity of our perception, and that then feeds into itself in that self-perpetuating feedback loop. And so quantum physics, all of a sudden, it shows up, in the world. And if you actually contemplate it in a certain way, you discover, oh my God, it's like shedding light on this very process. That because what quantum physics has shown is that the questions we ask when we do an experiment in quantum physics, the questions we ask, how we interpret the data, and the conclusions that we reach, it will all inform the answers we get back. So that the idea being that our consciousness, our state of consciousness, how we observe the experiment actually is affecting the experiment that we're observing. So the thing about quantum physics, it's, in the quantum, now keep in mind, quantum physics, it started out as the study of, trying to find what is the building blocks of this universe. So it was really trying to find what is the microstructure of this physical world. And as it was going more and more down into the microstructure of this universe, at a certain point, what it discovered was you couldn't differentiate, you couldn't separate out what the building block of the universe was from the very consciousness that was observing, that was trying to understand what the building block was. And quantum physics is not just the physics of the really small. What quantum physics is telling us is that this universe is quantum on every scale, that every dimension of our being, both big and small, is quantum through and through. Now, quantum physics, I think about with Einstein himself, who is one of the founders of quantum physics and was so freaked out by what it was showing us, because the thing just to create context, before quantum physics, there was pre-quantum physics, just Newtonian physics. In Newtonian sort of like classical physics, they imagined that there was an objective world, that they were just passively, that they were separate from and they were studying. Well, quantum physics has shown, no, like I was saying, there's no objective world at all. That's nonsense. And so that was where Einstein really had his edge. But he actually said that, this is a quote, he goes, quantum physics is so uncommonly important that it should be everyone's concern. And a whole lot of the other founding fathers, what they would say is that it's an incredible pity that not more people are awake to what quantum physics, what it's showing us, okay? And because, I'll just give you an example. So quantum physics, by proving that there's no objective anything out in the world out there, well, all of a sudden, that actually tells us something about ourselves, about who we are in all of this. Because if the world out there isn't objective, well, then what happened to the subject in here, who I've been, identifying with? You can call it the ego or just this reference point in third dimensional space and time. Because what you discover is that, wait, if there's no object, I can only be a subject if I have relation to an object. And if the universe isn't objective, then what happened to the subject? So you see, that's where quantum physics is actually, it's like promoting itself to be a spiritual path. And of course, keep in mind, this is not what the typical physicist signed up for. They go to graduate school and study physics and how to solve equations, and then they work either in academia or for the corporate world, and almost all of them are employees of whatever, of the machine that creates war in our world. And if a physicist in that domain is interested in consciousness, they can lose their funding, they can lose their job, they get marginalized and all of that. But there are certain physicists who were incredibly interested in what is this showing us? It's such, because, it's changed our world. It's changed the history of our world, the advent of quantum physics. Just think about with computers, or just, I can go on and on with all the technologies. But the really switched on quantum physicists are saying that's the low-hanging fruit. That's 1% of the benefit of quantum physics. And here I am an outsider, not a physicist. I'm coming in and saying, yeah, and what the benefit is, it's actually showing us not only who we are and our place in the universe, but it's actually, when you actually have the recognition of what it's showing us, it's actually unlocking the incredible creative power that each one of us have. But if we're not awake to it, then it's being turned against us in a way that's imprisoning us, and that's killing us. Okay. Now quantum physics, it's not just this incredibly, esoteric, complicated, like in this book that I wrote. Let me just hold up a copy just to show people. There's the book. See the quantum. Revelation. Anyway, so that's the book. But I point out that quantum physics, it's actually, it can really help us to contextualize and to understand our actual relationships, you know, in a way that we're all experiencing. Like even all the physicists are saying we experience quantum physics way more often than classical physics, just on a day-to-day basis, but we don't know it. And you know, I in the book, I actually really try to go into that. And I'll just give you an example. I'll just, because just came into my mind. This happened a number of years ago. I was with this my girlfriend. At that point, we were breaking up, so she was my ex-girlfriend. And it was early in the morning, and I was sleeping. And she wanted to ask me a question. We were still in the same house. I hadn't moved out yet. And she wanted to ask me a question, but she was afraid of the answer I was going to give. She was afraid I wasn't going to just say sure, that I was going to say no. So I'm asleep, and she comes to wake me up and to ask me this question with the expectation that I was going to say no. And so at that moment, for some reason, I had this awareness. As she was waking me up, I felt the part as she was asking, or just even the way she was asking the question, it was like she was invoking the part of me that was going to say no. And then I did. That was the part of me that she woke up. And as soon as I said no to her question, that confirmed to her, oh, I knew it. I knew Paul was going to say no and all that. So then I had gotten even more concretized in her mind that that's who I was. But I was tripping out over it, because it became clear to me, oh my God, I had the part of me that would have said yes, but that wasn't the part that she was actually invoking. And how come I wanted to share that story is because I think that happens all the time, that we all have all of these like subpersonalities or potentialities. And whichever one is, you know, think about it. When we're with different people, we'll show up in different parts of ourselves. And that's because, oh, with this person, they're projecting the shadow. Well, they're going to invoke this darker, shadowy part of me. And then once I manifest that way, that confirms to them that's who I am. So they'll be even more fixed in their viewpoint of seeing me as, you know, the shadowy figure. And of course, I might be doing the same thing to them. And we like dream up like the shadow to play out between us. But it's like, you know, and keep in mind what I'm describing is totally quantum physics oriented, because quantum physics is saying when you have a quantum entity, before it's observed, it exists in this superposition, in this open-ended potentiality of states in which every and any possibility that could ever manifest, it's there in potential. And the moment that you observe it, one, the actuality of how it actually will manifest, that's the one that will actualize, that will manifest, and all the potentialities, they just disappear like they never existed. Now, if you think about that, that's kind of what I was describing with this ex-girlfriend, that I had like other potentialities, other parts of myself, but like she was observing me in a certain way, and my, you know, sort of the wave function is a physics term of the potentiality just collapsed into the part of me that said no. And so I'm trying to give this little bit of a flavor how we're all interacting, you know, in the quantum realm, like all throughout the day. And it really helps when you have some sort of like, whether it's language or context, to actually understand that. And it's particularly helpful when you connect with other people. It's the idea in Tibetan Buddhism that I'm familiar with. They'll talk about, you know, the profound importance of Sangha, of community. When you actually hang out with other people who are also quantum activists or quantum activated, in the sense that they're awake, that we're like co-creating our experience together each and every moment, that we're all, in a way, co-creating this dream each and every moment. And there's something that's available when we come together in that way, where instead of like, if you think about like right now on planet Earth, you know, collectively as a species, from all appearances, I mean, we're creating what seems to be this nightmare. And but as each one of us connects with our quantum nature, with the incredible creative power that we all have 24/7. It's not like we first have to get it. It's not outside of us. But when we actually are able to consciously connect with that, and particularly connect with other people who are also awakening to that, that's the place where we can put our lucidity together and actually, potentially make this real difference in the world.